Blood dripped from Dr. Maya Thompson's cheek as cold metal cuffs dug into her wrists. Her voice shook, but remained clear. "Please, I was just picking up groceries." But the officers weren't listening. A lie had already painted her guilty. And as she begged to call her husband, they laughed. They didn't know who was on the other end of that call. But that phone call would destroy their careers and crack open a system they thought protected them. This is the story of how one black woman's wrongful arrest became a national reckoning. How a single act of racism inside a grocery store ignited an avalanche of reform lawsuits and institutional collapse. It is not a movie. It is not fiction. It is the true story of Dr. Maya Thompson, chief neurosurgeon, and her husband, Colonel Marcus Thompson, a high-ranking Army officer. Their lives were almost shattered by a lie. But what they uncovered along the way exposed a much deeper truth, one this country could no longer ignore. It started like any normal day. Maya adjusted her Howard University sweatshirt, grabbed her reusable bags, and headed into Greenleaf Market in Oakage Hills, a wealthy Nashville suburb where she and Marcus had recently purchased a home. As one of the only black families in the neighborhood, she was used to the stares, but today felt different. Inside the store, a security guard shadowed her every move. Then a white woman whispered something to the store manager. Moments later, Maya was confronted. "You took medication from her purse," the woman claimed. Maya, a neurosurgeon who had saved countless lives, stood in disbelief. "I didn't touch anything," she said calmly. But it didn't matter. 2 police officers arrived. They ignored Maya's words, dismissed her ID, and laughed at her mention of her husband, Colonel Marcus Thompson. "Yeah. And I'm the Secretary of Defense," one smirked. Without evidence, they twisted her arms and cuffed her, dragging her through the store like a criminal. But as she stood outside in handcuffs, something shifted. A convoy of military vehicles rolled into the parking lot. Out stepped Colonel Marcus Thompson in full uniform, flanked by other officers. His presence silenced the crowd. "I am Colonel Thompson, United States Army," he said, eyes locked on the arresting officer. "Why is my wife in handcuffs?" Suddenly, the confidence drained from the officers' faces. Still, they tried to stand their ground until Marcus mentioned a name, Police Chief Donovan, whose daughter Maya had once saved in emergency surgery. The mention alone changed everything. Within minutes, the chief arrived and the handcuffs came off. But Marcus wasn't finished. In front of the growing crowd, he demanded answers. "Where is the evidence? Why was she detained? What policy allows for this?" The store manager stammered. The woman who lied, Karen Whitfield, tried to slip away. But Marcus stopped her. "Did you lie about what happened?" She broke. "I thought she looked suspicious. The damage was done. Videos taken by bystanders had already gone viral. Maya, moments ago humiliated, was now seen as a symbol of dignity under fire. And then a man collapsed. An elderly black church deacon named Walter Jenkins had watched it all unfold, the stress too much for his heart. Without hesitation, Maya dropped to her knees and saved him right there in the parking lot, still bruised from the handcuffs. The officers who mocked her now had to watch as she saved yet another life. When the ambulance arrived, Maya got a call a teenager needed emergency brain surgery. She asked for a police escort, and Marcus insisted the same officers who detained her take her. Forced to serve the woman they tried to break, the officers led her back to Nashville Memorial sirens on clearing traffic for the neurosurgeon they didn't believe just an hour earlier. The story exploded online. Justice for Dr. Thompson trended nationwide. Within hours, the hospital issued a full statement of support. The store manager was fired. Karen Whitfield's employer placed her on leave. and deeper investigations began. But the attacks weren't over. The next morning, Maya and Marcus found their garage door spray-painted with a racial slur. The police arrived late and uninterested. Some surgeries were mysteriously reassigned from Maya's schedule. Anonymous complaints questioned her fitness to practice. Marcus was summoned by his military superior, accused of bringing unnecessary attention to the army. Still, they didn't stop. They partnered with civil rights attorney Elijah Washington and investigative journalist Zoe Carter. Together, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Minority families were 7 times more likely to be stopped in Oak Ridge Hills. Officers Simmons and Hanson, the same two who detained Maya, were involved in dozens of such incidents. Worse, George Simmons, the father of one of the officers and the president of the police union, sat on the HOA board. He was orchestrating pressure campaigns, smear attempts, and attempted to bribe a military officer into changing his testimony. When Officer Hanson's son was injured in a bike accident, it was Maya who saved him again, proving her oath mattered more than vengeance. Hanson couldn't even meet her eyes. Meanwhile, military officials launched an internal investigation and found both officers had falsified their records, hiding dishonorable discharges from previous military service. George Simmons was indicted for conspiracy and corruption. At the federal hearing, Maya and Marcus testified before the Department of Justice. They brought data, video testimony, and undeniable proof. Maya recounted her experience with calm power, refusing to let emotion break her message. When asked what she learned, she said, "Excellence is not a shield. Even in a sweatshirt, I was seen as a threat." Her voice echoed through the courtroom. Officers Simmons and Hanson were terminated and charged. George Simmons was removed from office and later convicted. A consent decree forced the Nashville Police Department to implement sweeping reforms. Body cam protocols were updated. A civilian review board was given real power. Karen Whitfield was sentenced to community service at a black church pantry. Over time, even she admitted her assumptions were rooted in bias she hadn't realized existed. The Thompsons stayed in Oak Ridge Hills. They hosted neighborhood events, organized inclusion programs, and became a symbol of quiet resistance. Maya mentored young black doctors. Marcus helped reform military-police relations. The scars remained, but so did the change. Would you have spoken up for Dr. Thompson if you were in that grocery store? Comment 1 if yes, or 2 if you think it's still too risky to intervene. Like this video if you believe accountability matters. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. And subscribe for more powerful, true stories that challenge injustice and remind us that change starts with courage. Thank you for listening to Maya and Marcus's journey from wrongful arrest to national reform. They didn't just survive injustice, they turned it into fuel for transformation. And if they can, maybe we all can.